Hello, folks, and a good evening to you. If you would, please, Jennifer, place our first. Before I begin getting into this PowerPoint presentation I've prepared for you folks, a little bit of personal history. I put 30 years doing critical care medicine, and I started seeing research back in the 90s where the science of cannabinoids, or cannabinoid science, was just beginning to become public knowledge. I'm a respiratory consultant, and I've got 13 different things stuck behind my name, learning to be a human being. And that's my point. I don't care who you are, where you come from, we all have one thing in common. We're human beings. And ironically, in this madness of today, one of the few social issues that touches upon everybody is the subject of cannabinoid science. And related to that subject, there's something called cannabis, a plant that has more cannabinoids than any other plant in the plant kingdom. There are a few plants that do have cannabinoids, but nothing to the amazing complexity that this plant has brought to humanity. It has been part of humanity's dietary, natural diet through all of history. It has been the most used medical, herbal preparation of medicine, drug, whatever term you want to call, throughout all of history. And it's still the #1 medication in the world. Having said that, is cannabis a human rights issue for personal medical use? Because you know, today you're criminalized if you are a cannabis consumer in most of the world. So let's talk about that subject. Fundamental rights include those rights that are expressly included in the Bill of Rights. Of course, we're here in the United States having this conversation. Along with other rights determined by the court as interests of the person so fundamental that the state must accord them its respect. And that's a very big word to use. Here are some documentation, some reference to that court case. Laws that burden the exercise of fundamental rights are strictly scrutinized and typically require the law to be narrowly tailored to further a compelling governmental interest. Examples of fundamental rights recognized by the court include the right to marry and procreate, the right to purchase and use birth control, the right to refuse medical treatment, and other rights related to individual autonomy. Self-determination, folks. Do you have autonomy for yourself? As a human being, we claim to have human civil rights. Let us go to the next one, please. So how do you research this? I'm going to plug this in here right now. The United States, you have what's called PubMed.gov. That is under the National Institute of Health, medical research for the United States government. In regards to cannabis and cannabinoid science research, it's been going on since the 70s. Cannabis prohibition is a violation of human rights. Research for yourself. Go to your government-created medical research database, PubMed.gov, and begin looking into this cannabinoid science. It is also recognized as the endocannabinoid system for your research because it's learning about the human being. And we have the most complex, amazing system called the endocannabinoid system. Next one, please. Okay. A right to health. Before we get into the talk this, let me finish that about this human cannabinoid system. And I say that specifically because there's two kinds of cannabinoids. Endocannabinoids, made by the human body, and the phytocannabinoids, the plants. And that's where controls come in. We'll come into that discussion a little later on. A right to health means what? Let's review that. The human right to health means that everyone has the right to be the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, which includes access to all medical services, sanitation, adequate food, decent housing, healthy work conditions, and a clean environment. The human right to health guarantees a system of health protection for all. Everyone has the right to health care they need and to living conditions that enable us to be healthy, such as adequate food, housing, and a healthy environment. Health care must be provided as a public good for all, financially, publicly, and equitably. The human right to health care means that hospitals, clinics, medicines, and doctor services must be accessible, available, acceptable, and of good quality for everyone on an equitable basis where and when needed. Next, please. The design of the healthcare system must be guided by the following key human rights standards. Universal access. Access to health care must be universal, guaranteed for all on an equitable basis. Health care must be affordable and comprehensive for everyone and physically accessible where and when needed. Next, please. Healthcare rights. Availability. Adequate healthcare infrastructure. Hospitals, community health facilities, trained healthcare professionals, goods, drugs, equipment, services, primary care, mental health must be available in all geographical areas to all communities. Accessibility and dignity. Healthcare institutions, and providers must respect dignity, provide culturally appropriate care, be responsive to needs based on gender, age, culture, language, and different ways of life and abilities. They must respect medical ethics and protect confidentiality. Human healthcare rights. Quality. Let's talk about the quality. Because when you get into corporate structures and how they try to cut the cost, what gets sacrificed a lot of times is quality. And that comes back in the reference to your health. All healthcare must be medically appropriate and of good quality, guided by quality standards and control mechanisms, and provided in a timely, safe, and patient-centered manner. The human right to health also entails the following procedural principles which apply to all human rights. Non-discrimination. Healthcare must be accessible and provided without discrimination in intent or effect, based on health status, race, ethnicity, age, sex, sexuality, disability, language, religion, national origin, income, or social status. What takes away such rights? Simple statement: discrimination. Transparency. Health information must be easily accessible for everyone, enabling people to protect their health and claim quality health services. Institutions that organize, finance, or deliver health care must operate in a transparent way. Participation. Individuals and communities must be able to take an active role in decisions that affect their health, including the organization, and implementation of healthcare services. Accountability. Private companies and public agencies must be held accountable for protecting the right to health care through enforceable standards, regulations, and independent compliance monitoring. These human rights standards I have listed are clear human rights principles, so that supposedly such standards will guide actions and policy positions. Now, before I start quoting where I got some of these resources from to back all up those statements, let's talk a little bit about what we just got through saying. As a human being, you have your own life. You have your own authority of life. The right to self-determination. It's a sovereign right. It's something that's been through all of history, that every human being has an individual sovereign right of self. We stand equal as human beings. And one of the amazing things about this discussion, this is one of the things that crosses all boundaries. It's one of the few things in today's madness that all people can talk on as one in unity. And we need so much of that in this world today. The point is to recognize that we're talking about a science that shows us the way how to physically take care of ourselves. But it's more than that. There are spiritual aspects into the use of nutrition and medicine. How many people know that there are literally cannabis recognized churches in the United States of America? 3 states have fully sanctioned and recognized under the freedom of religion 3 different churches based on cannabis as the tree of life. In the Judeo-Christian history, you'll find a lot of information about cannabism. Anybody have any history there on religious? Because we can have a long discussion on how the use of religion all through history has used cannabis oils as sacramental oils all over this world. Again, it's the oldest medicine in history we have, and it's been the #1 history throughout all of history. Did I say that right? It's been the #1 in history throughout all of history. Okay. The reason why I'm bringing this back is we have to go from the United States and look at the truth of this to the United Nations. Because this is where human rights declarations are in print and in policy for all of the world. Human rights have been declared. And back in 2000, there was a major declaration on human rights and those standards. And we are following those guidelines. The Universal, Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 12 of the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Article 24 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 5 of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, Article 12 and 14 of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, Article 11 of the American Declaration of Rights and Duties of Man, Article 25 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. How much of a scope, could you go back one second? How much of a scope of an impact on the cultures of humanity do we see here? We see, starting at the top, universal for all of us, beginning there with the equality and the unity of humanity. The second, we're looking at economic, social, and cultural rights. It's called civilization. It's called being civilized. We create our civilization through such standards of equality. Otherwise, we get into discriminations, as we all see all through history. And what a failure that's been. I'm a win-win leader. I want to hear a problem. I want to, after we declare the problem, we try to define the boundaries of getting a solution and become problem solvers. And people who are intelligent learn to do that together in communication and commitment and cooperation. So we see the economic, we see the social, we see the cultural, and then we get into the conventions of the child. Ironically today, we see cannabis therapeutics being so amazingly beneficial to children with certain medical conditions, both chronic and severe. Later we will talk a little bit about how big a spectrum that will be in the future. Our children are important, and I can tell you right now, when it comes to science and the quality of life, children need the cannabinoids that come from the cannabis plant. The elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. We don't even have to begin to talk that subject because it has been so many hundreds, if not thousands of years going on. And we, as the people, don't know when it's going to stop. The elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. You know, there's an old saying that brings back to my mind, divide and conquer. How bureaucracies, governments, in governance, practice social controls, and often instead of bringing unity, they focus on divide for control. The puppet strings and the gatekeeping we see in government today is driving everyone crazy. But here is a subject that we're trying to get to unify everyone on. And if Washington, D.C. begins to wake up to this, which I think the United Nations will bring across to them in 2018 as a requirement under international laws that will be changing then, because all of these conventions have been declared. And they are there on the books. It's called empowering the change through the bureaucracy. And to me, that takes the will of the people. We see the rights and duties of man, and that's a fascinating one to spend time talking in another time, because the focus here is about creating civilization with equality for all of us to grow forward in each life. I reflect back to the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's a human quality that we all want. Persons with disabilities. How many people in life have been disabled, not because of an illness that is physical, but one that's of social illness? How many lives have been disabled on this subject of prohibition? First time I'm bringing that word up, because in looking at the history of prohibition, it has been on deceptions, it's been on lies and manipulations to create profit margins and redirect industries into financial controls that has influenced everybody's life. But the disabilities I refer to are the 23 million people since prohibition has been started that have been incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis use. 23 million people over that history. I have no respect for that particular number, except to say, as an American, I'm sorry to every single person that's happened to, because that's not the America I'm trying to live for, as an American, as a human being. We do have a voice. We do have a powerful voice. And when we take the time to stand together, talk, communicate, and share and connect, there is nothing more powerful in this world than what we carry within our own selves, our spirit. And when we put that together, we change this world powerfully, instantly. Next, please. United Nations committees, treaty bodies comprised of independent experts, oversee the implementation of particular human rights treaties. These committees oversee the treaties by, among other things, receiving government and civil society reports on the implementation of the treaties, making comments to the government reports, and issuing general comments about the treaties or specific right contained therein. With regard to the human right to health, in the year 2000, the United Nations Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights issued legal guidance for implementation of this right. This all comes down to the idea of freedom. Objectively speaking, we aren't ever free. Objectively speaking. We are subjected to certain laws and social guidelines. Breaking these guidelines will result in the forfeiting of your liberty. Now, that's how governance takes action. The Mexican Supreme Court ruled 4-1 that banning the consumption and cultivation of cannabis for personal use violates the human rights to free development of one's personality. I find that one fascinating. The Mexican Supreme Court took a huge position on this stance. Undeniable proof that the war on drugs has failed came on Wednesday, November 4th, 2015, when the Supreme Court of Mexico ruled that smoking cannabis was a human right guaranteed by the Constitution under the right to free development of personality. Of course, that's the Mexican Constitution, not the American Constitution. This overruled the General Health Act, the federal law prohibiting cultivation and use of marijuana. And by the way, marijuana to a lot of committed activists is a curse word, because the term is cannabis. That's what the plant's name is. Marijuana was a cultural slang that was used to abuse an entire culture back in the 30s. The vote was 4-1. People lit joints outside the court in celebration. There was chanting of, "No si pueda, no, weed yes, war no." There are quite a few names in the medical world now coming out to make a huge statement across the world on this subject of cannabinoid science. I'm quoting two of them here who did some work together, Dr. Sunil Agarwal and Dr. Russo. These are their words. Allow me to read them. This prohibition of the therapeutic plant cannabis has denied a palliative and potentially curative healing agent to millions of people around the globe, and simultaneously criminalized and alienated countless people who chose to employ it for whatever reason. The attempts to eradicate this prolific plant in a continuing cultural war have poisoned the landscape, eliminated livelihoods, and pitted neighbor against neighbor. The costs to society have been astronomical, with no demonstrable gain. Instead, significant violations of human rights and ecological harm have been perpetrated. Specific violations for the International Bill of Rights include governments shrinking their specific legal obligation to refrain from prohibiting or impeding traditional preventative care, healing practices and medicines, engaging in the deliberate withholding or misrepresentation of information vital to health protection or treatment, and adopting laws or policies that interfere with the enjoyment of any of the components of the right to health. Personal medical consumption. The criminalization of indigenous traditional practices done without consultation of indigenous communities raise a number of human rights and development concerns. The ban on traditional uses of coca, opium, and cannabis was passed at a time when scant attention was given to cultural and indigenous rights, and before the adoption of key international instruments and relevant jurisprudence protecting the right of all indigenous peoples to free and prior informed consent relating to issues that affect them, and to maintain traditional, religious, and medical practices, and to own, develop, control, and use their real property and resources. Criminalization of drugs used for traditional and religious purposes likewise contradicts human rights, protections for the traditional and religious uses of controlled substances. That's a lot to say, guys. But we're dealing with the real truth of it. Next. Okay. Trying to move outside of the politics for a little bit. I want to talk about yourself. You as a human being. You as a person who wants to take care of yourself. One of the things that's really important today in modern medicine is the discovery of this most complex signaling system in the human body, the endocannabinoid system. What is it? The endocannabinoid system, ECS, is a group of endogenous, meaning made within the body, cannabinoid receptors. These are specialized cells to signal with. They're located in the mammalian brain and throughout the central and peripheral nervous systems. I say mammalian because all mammals have an endocannabinoid system, not just human beings. It's consisting of neuromodulatory lipids, fats, okay? And their receptors, because fatty acids and oils are very important in how our body does its biochemistry. Known as the body's own cannabinoid system, the ECS is involved in a variety of physiologic processes, including appetite, pain sensation, mood, and memory, and the mediating of psychoactive effects of cannabis. Now see, a lot of people, I'm going to stop right there before we go any further, talking about psychoactivity. It has been labeled with such a prejudiced mindset that when we hear the word, we think negative. Psychoactivity, ooh, that's called thinking, by the way, in real terms. You think. One of the things about the psychoactivity of cannabis, tetrahydrocannabinol delta-9, THC, what it does is it creates a signaling response with this endocannabinoid system that creates stimulation in the brain, new activity, new mental processes. It wakes the mind up. But it's even more complex than that, because if somebody has post-traumatic stress disorder, there's things they want to forget. Well, science today is now showing in mental health that when you use cannabis, a lot of times when you have that short-term memory loss, it actually is based on the psychology of letting go. We've already learned now in science that it's not a gateway drug to more criminalizing activities, like we saw in the movie Reefer Madness. In the full exact opposite medical study, we have shown that short-term memory loss has functional responsibilities in everyday life called coping. And when you cope in life, you remember things that are important and you tend to try to forget other things. And there's a whole sequencing of how we interact with ourselves, from coping mechanisms to how we learn to be problem solvers for our own life. The process of psychoactivity is just now being maturely looked at professionally within the mental health community. There's a new discipline called eco-psychology that's developing from psychology that represents how we look at sociologic use of such substances to improve our quality of life through these coping mechanisms that we develop every day. And we will continue to do for the rest of our existence, because we're human beings. We have emotions. We have perceptions based on our knowledges and skills. We are each unique as human beings. And every human being is unique. So as we develop our individual skills and mindsets, the nature of feeding those mindsets has been there all through history. And food, the basis of all drugs, is where the interaction begins. Because most people have not realized it yet, cannabinoid science, these things called cannabinoids, the United States government has a patent on them for being antioxidants, nutrients. They are all about nutrition, which crosses over into the world of medicine because of this signaling system called the endocannabinoid system. That is the most important thing to learn here, is about yourself, your endocannabinoid system, and how do you feed it. It's as simple as that, folks. You are feeding your body appropriate nutrients. Now, because of the complexities of it, we're trying to research this to figure out how to do it the best way. But here's the barriers, folks. I'll give you an example of Big Pharma, and I'm not trying to put them down. Although they do need to be contained quite a bit, and brought into the control of the people, to be honest. Big Pharma realizes as much as 80% of their medications can be replaced in the first year it becomes legalized all over the country for medical use. Because the sheer cost is much less, but the benefits are much greater than all the combined pharmaceutical agents that the industry creates. because of this endocannabinoid system you're feeding it. It's a totally different psychology of preventative health care versus using pharmacology to create symptom management and disease control. This is not the process of healing. Economically, sociologically, environmentally. This is not a solution pathway of the pharmaceutical companies that they are on. It is a pathway of maintaining disease and cultural expense at our expense and their profit. And it's gotten so large, I'll give you an example. There's a new drug out, and this new pharmaceutical company, excuse me, not new, a pharmaceutical company that has this drug for MS treatment is releasing it for, you ready for this? The treatment cost, $89,000 for a medicine. Think about it. Next, please. Most people do not know cannabinoids are nutrients. Vitamins is the older term people are familiar with. They're vitamins, antioxidants, nutrients. Next, please. Oh, stop. Go back, please. Current list includes 84 cannabinoids in research and more to be explored. Some researchers say there's 100 plus. This number has been used in current count. We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right there. And as you see, there's branching off of how they interact with the human body. And there's so much going on, recognizing how this nutritional medical approach is turning people away from a disease process, but into a healing recovery process. And that's within the human body. That's not a pharmaceutical company or a government program saying what's right for your body. This is your body saying it's what's right for your body. That's the important thing to realize here. Because there's a new pathway going in this cannabinoid science called neurogenesis. And basically that simply means the body figures out how to heal itself. Because this system has the capacity to go in and write DNA code with the right nutritional support. We're trying to figure that out. Pharmaceutical companies have been trying to figure that out since the 70s. That's why we see a few of these companies coming out with it. GW Pharmaceuticals is now starting an oncology program with cannabis. They're doing full spectrum medication there with cannabis for that program over in England. The pharmaceutical companies have been looking at this for 40 plus years and trying to figure out how to unravel it. Research has been limited and banned for so long that they've gotten to a stop point. They want to make more money on this, but they see if it's going ahead, their money's going to stop. So they're in a quandary. Next, please. Is cannabis use a human right for personal medical use? Yes. 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 Anybody here want to say no to that? And if you do, let's talk about why we feel that way. 100% in this room, and there's more than me. Questions? It's a good time to interact with you folks. Hi, I'm glad you're here. What do you think of what I presented to you so far?
Informative.
Say again?
Informative.
Informative. Thank you. Well, I've got a whole lot more stuff I can put up here when we talk about the science of it here in a bit. This was more about getting you to realize that it is a human rights issue. And the entire pathway of medicine right now is taking us in the wrong direction. I spent 10 years of my life being an elected official, folks. There was a story that I used to give to my peers And I never called myself a politician. I referred to myself as a statesman trying to learn how to be a representative of the people. Because I'm a win-win leader. I'm here to service it, not play other games. But in that 10 years of my life, I kept seeing the challenge of management controlling leadership. This bureaucracy, and the power players of the bureaucracy controlling the leadership. See, there's a story called Wrong Jungle that I like to relate to people. You're making your way through the jungle of life and you're trying to get somewhere, but you're not really sure yet. You've got directions, but you're building your path there. Your team, your family, your people, however you want to describe it, you're making your way. Your society. And you got your managers out saying, we're making progress, we're making progress, we're making progress. Keep doing this. But every now and then, we got individual people. They climb a tree and they look around. Where are we going? What are we looking at? What do we see? And all of a sudden, a person sees we're going in the wrong direction. And they yell out, wrong jungle! How many people raise their voice to say things? And quite often, management will look up and say, shut up, we're making progress, get back down here. You can be making progress, but going in the wrong direction. And sooner or later, if it's in the wrong direction, it's got to stop and change direction, or you wind up like a lemming going over the cliff. Yes, sir?
Who's that management we talking about? States?
Well, we can call it governance. We can call it... How do we see governance in life? Well, of course, we know about government, but how do we see other ways we are governed in life? Schools have their own system of governance.
Indoctrination, okay.
Yes, thank you. The whole process of indoctrination we see in the corporate environment. You go in through employment and you go into orientation and you are indoctrinated. That's a requirement of structure for due process, and you got to get your stamp. Breaking the golden handcuffs of indoctrination requires knowledge and awareness. Society and cultures can frame up a path of how and where they're going. We see all different parts of the world with all different cultural imprints and formats, and we all try to build our paths. But sooner or later, they all lead to one place, and we call that humanity. How well we hold it together is another subject of discussion. But coming back to each individual human being, when you're trying to take care of your own quality of life, which to you means health, do you determine that? Or does a governance and a bureaucracy determine that? You know, when you work in corporations of good size, they determine what health benefits you get. They may give you one or two choices, but that's what they pay for. You see how the system grows as a burden upon the problem solving of people as human beings, as individual human beings, and why we need to have an understanding of how something like this, a plant, provides a powerful nutrient that's been in our diet all through history and proven through scientific research that this is one of the most beneficial paths to take in medical science. Yes, sir?
But when you're up against a $1 trillion industry called Big Pharma, there's a lot of folks who, that I know, use cannabinoids. I am one of them, 3-year cancer patient, and I chose not to use the quote-unquote traditional medical treatment. It's out here. It's been out here.
Yes.
It's underground, but it's out here, and folks like me are still living, we're still surviving without using traditional medication, and we're surviving. So, and it's already in our legislation already, and they're going to push it through in the next couple of years, we're going to have, but the big boys waiting on us, they can control the dispensaries. Psychologically is a state that we can have at least 3 dispensaries, and all the lawyers have jumped on board, and now They are. So it's coming, but it's been happening for 10 years now.
Well, I'm in agreement with you on all that you just said. Stepping forward from where we are is about telling our leaders to learn the knowledge of what's going on. Not about the prohibition of prejudgments that we have seen for so long, but to stop, look, and listen to what is the truth.
So, Dr. Byrd, you want to address the science behind cannabis, like particularly recreational use versus as a medicine, how it impacts the body and what it does, how it works in the healing process?
We have lots of stuff on my other chip, but I'm not going to pull that up just yet. If we go to take a break, I will take on to set up some of the science stuff here that we can begin that, but I'll talk briefly before we take a break so I can set that up. The science. As I started with the endocannabinoid system, I need to clarify a little bit more about that for everyone to understand. We did not have a diagnosis in the diagnostic relating groupings of insurance for anything related to this until 2007. Clinical cannabinoid deficiency syndrome. You see, your body is constantly feeding itself and rebuilding itself. Your cells get changed out, turned over, gotten rid of. It's called life. But how do we feed that? And how do we control that feeding to change it over into what we call metabolism and body function? We used to think the central nervous system did all this work through its signaling, but it wasn't enough. Research kept finding more and more back in the 60s that we're not connecting the dots here to figure this out. We had to go deeper and deeper into the cellular biochemistry to see how this signaling process was going on, to create all this communication the cellular activity has. And lo and behold, science showed there was an even more complex system than the central nervous system. The most complex system in the human body. Virtually every human cell is signaled by the endocannabinoid system. And what's more, this system has a way of sending crossover signals back and forth to the central nervous system. So the nerves doing all these electrical signalings, and the endocannabinoid system is doing all these biochemical nutrient signalings. And there's a crossover going on. Research is showing how it's all beginning to cross over. So let me stop at that point so we can set up a few technical things here and we can come back to our conversation. Can we take about a 10-minute break? 5-minute break? 5-minute break, please.
Take 5.
Thank you. It's on the same. Everybody ready? Okay, I'll start up again. During the break, I had a short conversation there, and something was brought up in the conversation called synthetic cannabinoids. So I'm going to touch on basically to recognize when it comes to the human body, there are 3 types of cannabinoids now that are in existence. The cannabinoids that the body makes, and they're called endocannabinoids, and there are 2 of them. There is some research looking for a 3rd, but right now 2 of them have been identified. One is called anandamide. The brain makes this one particular cannabinoid, and it controls all of what we know as metabolism. Your metabolic rate, your energy, your life force, those things that, in reference, what controls it is a single cannabinoid called anandamide in the brain for a very specific receptor called CB1. But there's also not just what the body makes, but what the plants make. They're called phytocannabinoids. And thanks to Big Pharma, there's now one called synthetic cannabinoids. And we're seeing a lot of danger in that. I'll pick that up in a bit. But here's why I want you to take a look at this picture to get a very simple understanding of cannabinoid science when it comes to the human body. It's about signaling. It's how the body talks to everything it's got. Well, we have what's called the nervous system, and this central nervous system has this electrical conduction pathway. This central nervous system basically is a neuron that has a space called a synapse, and it uses chemicals along with electrical impulses called neurotransmitters to send from one neuron to a receiving neuron to take those biochemical electrical signals that are specific for the central nervous system. But we couldn't figure out in research that didn't get to everything in the body. When a nerve ends, how does a cell over here get signals when the nerve ends over here, away too far to receive that signal? Research has shown that while this picture here is rather very simplified, there are millions and millions, if not billions, of microreceptors surrounding all the outside of these neurons. And these receptors are already in other areas in the body, in cellular structure as well. It is so complex, this signaling system is what is carrying crossover messages. Not only is it able to see the central nervous system signal and just go this way, but it's able to take signals back from the cells, and through all these millions of receptors surrounding these neurons, they're able to send signals back up as keys to unlock messages back to the brain. We often see this work when we're working when we are injured and we have pain, because this system actually controls the pain signaling system, the endocannabinoid system, not the central nervous system. But they play roles, they're interactive. It's called the human body. But what is really making all this stuff talk? The process of coming down here and feeding information back up within the structure. That's what the endocannabinoid system is doing, sending messages. But what we see, it is working in two specific zones. As I mentioned in the brain, the CB1 receptor, which controls metabolic rate, metabolism. The other is dealing with the autoimmune system throughout the body, the CB2 receptor. And there's a receptor specifically designed, and the body makes a chemical specifically designed for that, which is a cannabinoid. And it's called 2-AG. The name's about that long. 2-arachidonyl. I'll stop there. Point is, it's a long name. But it's identified that the body makes this to feed this CB2 receptor. And in its feeding, it's able to tell signals to either upregulate or downregulate to the autoimmune system, which controls inflammation. So in other words, you give a cannabinoid of a certain type to this system, it will tell the body to shut down the inflammation. And right now we see that in one particular cannabinoid called cannabidiol, CBD. This one nutrient feeds the signaling system, and it tells the autoimmune system to turn down the inflammation, even stop it. This is why cannabis is so valuable to all diseases. If you can give a nutrient to the human body signaling system, and it can take that nutrient and turn off dis-ease from inflammation, you stop a lot of illness. Next picture. I'm going to take a moment here to relate to the plant in regards to this science we're talking about. We're looking at what's called the flower of the plant. Most people know the leaf. It's called a fan leaf, that big old thing. It's a fan leaf. There can be 5 or as many as 9 protruding leaf structures from one leaf. So people look at it, they say, oh, well, you look for a count of 5. That doesn't work, folks. Okay, so what does the plant do after a period of time of growing? In vegetation, it's called. It goes into what's called a flower state. And it produces this kind of flower. You get what's called sugar leaves, helping to create high energy development for the buds to build and the seeds to form. They're called colas, pistils, calyx. But here's the big thing to know about. If you ever get a chance, take a look at a cannabis flower under a microscope. It doesn't have to be a very powerful one. You can almost see them all with the naked eye. They're that big. But when you go to look at it, they look like this. Like a forest of trees with little globes on top of them. Well, those little globes are called trichomes. They are cannabinoid manufacturing plants. They make cannabinoids. Within these trichomes is what makes this plant so valuable. No other plant in the plant kingdom has that ability. That's what makes us the king of the plants when it comes to looking at cannabinoid science. This one plant makes more chemical manufacturing for cannabinoids than the pharmaceutical industry has been able to map out, and we've already done genetic coding. We need more research time. But here's the point. That is the most powerful nutrient in nature for the human body. Next slide, please. Marijuana prohibition costs the government $20 billion a year, and this is a statistic probably at least 3 years old now. Colorado taxes, 2 years old, okay. Colorado taxes it to raise $40 million for new schools. They've gone beyond that in Colorado. They've actually started a new homeless program because of the tax revenues to get the homeless people to have stable lives. And that's unheard of around this country when we're seeing homeless people being criminalized for sleeping in what's called inappropriate places. Discrimination. Next. I'm pointing this out because we're getting the money. But I want to get back to the science of this because the money is what's controlling this science and has for so long. The entire principles of prohibition were built upon deception and greed and manipulation of society to create industrial structures of profits and grand big schemes of growing this country. Well, they've done it. And we have paid the price as citizens. Now it's time we collect on that investment. One could argue that the abuse of McDonald's has a greater potential health care cost than the abuse of marijuana. Time magazine. It has to do with dietary facts. If you fill somebody full of high cholesterol, they're going to clog up their arteries. That's what McDonald's is known for with their food issues. Next, please. Okay. I talked about it being spread all throughout the body, this system, this endocannabinoid system. So let's kind of get a little depth in looking at this. We talked about it in the brain, so that's not here. That's the CB1 receptor, where anandamide controls metabolism. But this is all about the body functioning. Now we see CB1 and CB2. You see how they're both here in certain organs. You see in the reproductive organs, CB1, muscles, CB1, gastrointestinal tract. Liver actually has both, and there's a reason for that. Lungs, bones have a CB2, but the lungs have a CB1. Vascular system, CB1. Spleen, CB2. Pancreas, CB1 and 2. Why I'm pointing this out is because this is about signal encoding. And I know everybody here has heard the old term Morse code, how back in World War II they had the Morse code. Well, it's the same kind of analogy. You've got a signaling system here that has a way of differentiating the signals to the point it can do cellular reconstruction. This endocannabinoid system with these cannabinoids can rewrite DNA code. That's how powerful this nutritional research is showing the promise of the future. Rewriting mitochondrial DNA construct. So through nutrition and knowledge, we can feed the body, and the body corrects the deficiencies and deficits of genetic malformation, turning dysfunction into function. That's called healing again. And in terms of science, we're referring to it right now as neurogenesis. Okay. The two big players in this cannabinoid system of science are THC and CBD. I'm going to keep this very simple. THC, psychoactivity. CBD, physical activity. Having a nutrient that helps regulate the imbalances that go with physical activity. This CBD, cannabidiol, has the ability to work within the body and shut down inflammation. So much more than that. It's the second most abundant cannabinoid. It binds to the CB2 receptors in the immune system. So we're talking about immunology here. I'm only showing you the tip of the iceberg talking about this. It's not psychoactive. It reduces mental effects of THC. It reduces THC. Come back to that in a minute because they balance each other out for a reason. It's called the entropy effect. High CBD and THC amounts create a clear head high. Clear head psychoactivity. Again, that's called focus and thinking when applied correctly in science. High CBD and THC amounts create a clear head high. Low CBD levels will produce a hazier, foggy feeling, good for inflammation, migraines, arthritis, and muscle. Next. All this discussion, you see all those little white dots all over the plant? That's what it's about. Those are trichomes. That's the manufacturing system of this plant creating these nutrient chemicals called cannabinoids. Next. Next. Okay. At this point, to recognize there is a big difference between talking nutrition and talking the powerful medicine to make the body change the dysfunction and dis-ease of the body. They're very different standards. Yet we have a science related to, how to put it, homeopathy. I'm not sure what discipline you would call that, except homeopathy is about microdosing. Very, very micro amounts to trigger a body response. So homeopathy looks at the very, very small amount trying to create a human response within the body to heal itself. You see it works well in homeopathy in regards to viruses. One example. An interesting profession to pursue. But going up from the microdosing, you get into everyday nutrition, herbal, pharmaceutical management of a healthy lifestyle. It's called feeding yourself good nutrients. In cannabis, where I'm headed with this is there's several levels to understanding. You've got the microdosing, a little bit of amount can make a big change in certain people's metabolism. But there are genetic reasons that works, and for others it doesn't work. And then you get into how we've seen the herbal history in the world. You know, there's an herbal pharmacopoeia. Anybody here an herbalist? Okay, you can relate to where I'm going with this. The principle of pharmacology today was developed by herbalists. And they developed it out of understanding foods. Plants. That leads to a long line of understanding of how we apply our healthcare today, because the practice of herbal medicine is very different than what we call Western medicine. Yet to me, this creates the link in herbal medicine with this plant to modern medicine as a science. And they cross over both art and science in the application for the human event. Herbalists now can find a way to practice to the point of assisting in cancer care through cannabinoid nutrition. Anybody here heard of Rick Simpson? He is an international figure from Canada that developed a formula to fight cancer. It's called Rick Simpson oil. And it has been proven very effective. The Canadian government threw him out of the country back, I think in the 90s. He has a movie out called Run for the Cure, and I encourage anyone who's dealing with cancer to take a look at that, because this is his dosing for cancer care, for cancer patients. And I'm right now trying to work with a couple of oncologists to begin cancer therapeutic programs for their cancer patients, starting with understanding this. Cancer oil treatment. This treatment is experimental and used by cancer patients. Science research shows it works. Most are able to finish the entire treatment in 90 days. I point that out because it's a saturation technique. You saturate the human body with these nutrients and they get busy. But you've got to have so much nutrients to make that happen, because these are powerful metabolic responses. The goal? Consume 60 grams of cannabis oil in 90 days. Now here's the caveat on that. That 60 grams of cannabis oil has to be a certain standard quality in lab values. And Rick Simpson has those standards. They are out there on the internet, and he tells you how to prepare it to get to that laboratory standard and quality. They even have YouTube videos on it. Week 1, start with 3 doses daily, about half the size of a short grain of rice, because when you take a syringe and this oil is thick, almost like glue. Think of Gorilla Glue that's been dried a bit. That's when it comes out of the syringe. It'll come out actually like a grain of rice, like a black green grain of rice. You have to build a tolerance, because if you're not used to THC, it will get you, quote, stoned. Psychoactivity, quite often in new people, actually turns out to be a process of letting go of a lot of stuff we tend to hold in by stress. So quite often, the first time a stoner gets stoned, they're going, whoa, I mean, this is cool. What were we doing? The short-term memory loss, once again. There are mechanisms that sociologically we need to research, because we cope so many ways in life, and this has been one of them for thousands of years. And it's also waiting for us to have it as a tool for problem solving in healthcare, personal healthcare. Okay, so you've got to build a tolerance to this psychoactivity. And believe it or not, with chronic use, the stoned effect goes away. Other things take over, like quality of health and quality of life. The mindset has a huge factor in understanding this. So you start taking it because you're fighting for your life. Weeks 2 through 5, you double your intake every 4 days. You're building up the resources, nutrient-wise, for the body to take action with. And it takes time, and it is a process of signaling. Weeks 5 through 12, you should be able to consume 1 gram per day. Ingest 1 gram a day until your 60-gram supply is gone. And then you reevaluate. You go through assessment. Create a new plan of action if it's still needed. And we really don't know where to go with this yet because of the limitations on medical research. I would love to give you more information on that, but here is the point. You get to a place from practical research fact to where we're talking theory and probabilities. And while we can do that, it doesn't put us on the right steps yet. Next, please. To me, this is one of the most fun things to show people. We're talking about chemistry here, biochemistry. I talked about CBD, the second most abundant cannabinoid, right here. The most abundant is called THC in the plant. Here's what's really powerful about looking at this. Without getting into the chemistry of it, let's talk about what's elemental. THC has 3 elements: oxygen, hydrogen, carbon. 3 elements. CBD has 3 elements: hydrogen, oxygen, carbon. They're almost identical, except for 1 hydrogen ion. They're almost identical, yet they do so much in difference and crossover in signalings. Again, it's about that signaling system, not just about the chemistry here. Because these are so very basic, elemental-wise. It's about understanding the structure and how it keys into these receptors and creates the signaling process. But it's more than that. Those signals can then release and cross over to the central nervous system to do other signalings. It's so amazing. We try tracking out CBD. It's not doing one thing, but it may be doing 1,000 things within the human biochemistry. It's about the fatty acids. Anybody remember talking fatty acids in nutrition in school? This is the next step in understanding fatty acid nutrition. It's here. This is how simple it is. These acids are so elementally basic, and that's how the body's able to take them in the structures, and key them in the way they do so simply, and release them to cross over in communications and signals with the nervous system. And we're just beginning to look at that research. To me, this is where getting an insight into how the body creates the healing process, the neurogenesis, is and will be understood. In the next 10 years, in my opinion, that's pretty close. To find out that we can change over from a system that maintains coping with disease with pharmacology, treating the symptoms, keeping them under control, versus going to a system that allows the body to heal and stop the need for pharmacology. Period. And the body cures the problem through its own mechanisms, through appropriate resourcing of nutrition. I hope I'm making sense on that. Next, please. These little balls on top of these called trichomes. The chemical manufacturing plant that has so much impact on the pharmacology, the big pharma industry, and humanity. That little tiny thing right there. Next. this doesn't show up very well. Briefly, this is talking about cannabinoids, this is talking about how they change an acid structure, and this comes down to what's called terpenes. Now in nutrition, you've got things like flavonoids and something called terpenes. Smell is what they work on, believe it or not. The chemistry of smell, aromatherapy. Believe it or not, chemical structures in the plant kingdom are keyed to smell structures. So when you smell a certain food or resource, you smell a terpene, it leads you to a certain food. That's my point. In nature, smell tells you where your food is. These chemical structures of smell are teaching us huge new pathways of how the brain is responding to such things as smell. Yes, sir?
I think this is a good point for you to ask this question. Are there other phytochemical compounds that work synergistically to either, with cannabinoids, to either support healing or to maintain wellness?
I'll give you a precursor to that and use opioids as an example. Opioids work on the pain mechanisms in the endocannabinoid system. Okay? They have found that combining micro amounts of opioids with micro amounts of cannabinoids can create a pain controlling signal modulation. Where I'm headed with that is that there's lots of promises in trying to answer your question, but we're not there yet. I can give you a lot of stuff on that, but we're not there yet. Sorry to put it to you that way.
No problem.
That's part of the frustration. The thing is, for 40 years we've been waiting to move ahead in medical research. For 40 years to answer these very kind of questions responsibly. And yet I've got to say this. The government has known this all along. Every time there has been a major commission, it's been in favor of the cannabis and the cannabinoid science. It's represented. To me, what the government is now doing in regards to it is holding a criminal action against the people.
It's big money. Also,
And that's why,
it's big
money.
Pharmaceutical company know about it too.
Well, I'll be honest to you,
Oh,
if
yes.
the United Nations does not change under the human rights standards they have in 2018, they're supposed to do a final vote on international drug law reform, and they're supposed to legalize it then. Well, if they don't do it then, I know of international organizations that will file in court internationally and challenge that decision.
She said 2018.
2018.
We're still there.
Now, of course, we've got to see all this play out, just like we're watching right now with our administration play out and the changing of the guard. Next, please. If we are supposed to start with the least harmful medications, cannabis should be the first treatment for many conditions. I can take it to you every single way you analyze it. It is best medicine when appropriately applied.
So that point, hypothetically, there's a football player that is strung out, you just mentioned overlords, which is really not good, okay? But a lot of the NFL and NBA players are seeing they can take this use and be healed. However, they're going to get banned from playing.
Well, to bring that a little bit further in point, I believe the NFL will open new doors for their football players. For example, combining CBD with opioid compounds to create microdosing that manages their pain without all those side effects. They're still going to do the opioids at the current level of practice that's in
But that-
professional football. What's that?
But overlords are more severe, I would think.
Well, I'll flip it to you another way. Playing football. You got a Little League football player. He gets a concussion. Sometimes they're pretty mild playing Little League football, but they hurt.
No, they have more They practice more than the NFL.
Well, let me put this to you. You can now have a drink prepared. You go to the bar and you order yourself a beer or a cocktail with alcohol, and you can put CBD in that drink and minimize your hangover because how it controls inflammation. It's one of the new things in society. Get yourself your alcoholic beverage, put some CBD in it, you don't have the problems of hangover the next day. Add a little B12 to it, you get your energy back. Cannabidiol, CBD, is proven to be very effective with children. So if you've got a football player playing Little League football and he gets a bang in the football game and he comes up with a concussion, well, a CBD beverage is all he's got to take to stop the inflammation for a mild concussion and make it go away, because it's all about inflammation in the brain. With a concussion.
Yeah, but it's going, you think sports medicine and or the AMA?
They're looking at that right now. And the legal states are looking at right now how to create this type of product line for inflammatory control within everyday dietary patterns, like our beverages. You can add it to your coffee. I mean, people are doing that right now in legal states. Why not? You're feeding your body nutrition. And here's the thing, alcohol has a toxic side effect. It is poison. But if you give an anti-inflammatory agent to it that prevents the inflammatory response to all this toxin, you don't have the damage from the alcohol.
In essence.
In essence. Well, this is all new stuff. But the point is, preventing the damage for quality of health. That's called preventative health care. And if we put that in our nutritional patterns in everyday life, it can change things. Like, how do you treat your Little League football player who got his head banged? It's not enough when he's in the hospital, but you got to watch him. Well, you give him a CBD drink. I'm just giving you an example. Over 3 days, he has maybe 2 of them a day for 3 days. If he shows symptoms at any time during that seems to escalate, of course, go see your physician. Go to the hospital if necessary.
So in essence, it's healing the inflammation.
And there's the point. We have to grow into this knowledge and experience and bring it out and put it into practice. And here's the thing. A Little League football player, just like an NFL football player, can benefit from the protective nutritional therapies this represents. Living with head trauma is a very difficult thing, and it's an effect to a person's life, their whole life, once it's occurred. But here's the thing. The brain can repair that damage with the right nutritional resources. And this is where it's coming from in research. We can heal our damaged bodies. And in time, learn how to properly feed it nutritional-wise to where we not only heal, we rebuild and correct our physical impairments. You put that psychology into everyday life with your nutritional dietary process, and you change the quality of life for everybody. Just putting that on the table. Next. Okay. I mentioned alcohol. Let's look at it in those factors. I don't like the word marijuana. Cannabis. Dependence. Statistics right now show there's a dependency of 3 to 1. Or to give you a percentage, 8.9% of the cannabis consuming population has the potential for dependency. Current research levels. 8.9% of cannabis consumers have the potential of dependence. Demographics shows it's less than 2% in current statistical collecting. And the marijuana industry is doing all that collecting right now. Withdrawal. How many people do you know have to go back to the alcohol after trying to get back on it? It's a 6 to 1 dependency ratio. And people who have a dependency and try to get off of it and have to go back, Quite often, it's not a physical withdrawal as it is a psychological withdrawal. Coping. We cope in life, and our mindset and the framework of our mindsets determine how we cope in life. These are tools we use in life. Cannabis and alcohol. Running on down, tolerance, it's a 4-to-1. Reinforcement, and it has to do with psychological reinforcement. 4-to-2. Intoxication, 6-to-3. Next. I'm going to be wrapping up here, folks, in just a moment. Cannabis is the safest medicine known to the human race. Cannabis prohibition is a crime against humanity. It's time for the crime to stop. And I thank you for listening to me. I know I've been long-winded, but you can see my passion is here. I believe in what I'm presenting to you, and every single one of us deserves our own quality of life and the resources we choose as self-sovereign, individual, human beings in an equity we call humanity. Thank you very much.